Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Shola, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to chat.
Likewise. Shola, you're an author, speaker, and coach on the subject of workplace bullying, and you are on a mission to end the professional suffering that we see within organizations. Can you share with us what inspired you to dedicate your life to changing how we treat each other within the workplace?
Yeah, first of all, again, thanks for having me and allowing me to share my story on your podcast. I feel, kind of called to do this work, for lack of a better way of putting it. When I was younger, I was bullied a lot as a kid for a lot of different reasons. As I got older and got into the working world, I also kind of experienced similar behavior. Not the schoolyard bullying, pushing you up against the locker type of bullying, but just the harassment, the intimidation, the rudeness. When I was in a workplace, give or take 20 years ago, I was in a pretty toxic work environment, and I got to a point where I fell into a really deep depression, and I got every opportunity to try to get the behavior to stop or to address it or what have you. Usually I actually blame myself for it, which now looking back on it was really not serving me at all. But to make a long story painfully short, one morning while driving to this toxic job, I just got into a place where I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with all of it. And I'm not talking about being done with the job. Unfortunately, I was saying that I was done with my life. I decided that I was going to attempt suicide that morning. And while driving to this toxic job, I attempted to drive my car off the freeway overpass in an attempt to make it look like an accident. And thankfully, the guardrail held. I came back in the traffic and I'm still here. But the reality is, after being bullied a lot as a child and seeing a lot of rudeness and incivility in my life growing up, I just got to a point like, someone's got to do something about this. This just isn't okay. And after a while, some friends were like, hey, man, you're someone. Why don't you do something about it? Like, me? Whoa, I'm not going to do anything about it. Like, I'm not qualified. I don't have any skills to do this. And I kind of gave that a second thought. I was like, well, wait a second. Why can't I do something about this? I have a voice. I can write. I can put my words out there for people to consume and maybe learn from or share my experience. And so I did. I started a blog and I started writing it. And it initially started with the topic of workplace bullying and incivility. That's where kind of this all began. But after kind of looking at that, it was a very narrow way to kind of pigeonhole myself. I decided to kind of take it a little bit more global, for lack of a better way of putting it. And workplace incivility and bullying was where it got my start. And I decided to kind of talk about just incivility generally in the world and how it's making it hard for people to just coexist. We can't seem to disagree without disrespect in our country, in our world, and how we can stop just people harming each other in ways that are making it harder for people's mental health to flourish and to create joyful lives, which is really what I'm here to really create. So it all started from a dark place, as usually a lot of good things do, ironically. So that's where it started. And now I've dedicated my life to helping people to remove workplace bullying, remove incivility in our world, and get people communicating again in a way that's going to create more joyful outcomes.
So beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing this pivotal moment in your life that I imagine must have been so horrendous for you to consider taking the actions that you were talking about. How did you manage to find your way out of the darkness? And I know now, when we're looking at all your accomplishments and all the wonderful things, take us through some of the steps that may help some of our listeners that may be struggling also with a similar challenge in their life, and they need to find that ray of light. What first steps could they take that you took and that worked for you?
Yeah, so great question. It's so interesting about that moment in time. It was less than a minute, right? It's like probably like 15 seconds, maybe even not even that it was just so quick, but it stayed with me. This feeling of like, oh my gosh, I almost did something that could have really ended my life. I'm glad for podcasts like this where we can go a little bit more long form, because on stage, it seems like this really cool hero's journey. I attempted suicide and all of a sudden I decided I'm going to change the world. Like, that's the reality is that's not how the story went at all. The story went with me being in a really dark place of just self-loathing and depression, where I wasn't getting out of bed after I quit my job, and I was really, really struggling for a while. I decided one morning that I was just going to take one step. And it meant figuratively, but also literally too, like a step out of bed, a step outside. I'm going to brush my teeth today. And that may sound gross to some of you. Like, really, that's a thing that you had to think about. But when you're in that space, you really don't, self-care is not really a huge priority. So I decided that I was going to take one step at a time. And the one thing that I really regret about that situation that I would advise others who are in it is get help. I did not get help. I was in a place where I'm the problem, I'm the issue, I'm broken, and no one, I'm not worthy of getting help, which is sounds also strange. Looking back on that, I really should have done that differently. Reached out for help. Now I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for many years, and it's been a life changer for me because I still struggle, not with suicidal ideations, thankfully, but with depression. When I'm what's called an HSP, a highly sensitive person, an empath, so I feel things very deeply. So things that the average person can just shake off, like someone cuts you off in traffic, or you see someone on the side of the street who's experiencing homelessness, like a poor guy. For me, I'm like, oh God, what must this be like for this person? This poor guy is out here and it's cold and it's raining and he's hungry. And I think about that. I perseverate on it. And on some days, it really is hard to navigate the world this way, because it's just like you feel so much, but at the same time, it gives me, I would want to say, the energy to want to help, to heal, to fix things that I see are broken and the injustices in the world. But long story short, because I'm an empath and I'm really struggling with these things, it took me a while to pull myself out of it. And if I got help early on, it would allow me to make sense of the situation quicker than I did. I had to do it the long way. There's a train or a bus, and I decided I'm going to just crawl on my hands and knees. And that's what it looked like when I didn't get help. So that's something that I would have done differently, because it wasn't just suicide attempt, build a business, helping the world. It was this really slow path to get there over the span of about 10 to 11 years.
Wow, took so long. And on that path, particularly since, as you've described yourself as a very sensitive individual, how did you build back your self-esteem? Because that's one important point that really has allowed you to propel yourself to completely new heights and get on stage, share your story, and inspire others to think differently, to act differently, and really just to create a better world. How did that process happen?
I'm still building my self-esteem. I think it's just this ongoing process of just trying to navigate the world in a way that makes sense. So I'm not at a place where I figured this out, but oftentimes what I did is I acted before I was ready. This is the story of my life. I was like, who am I to heal broken workplaces? Okay, well, I don't know who I am. I'm going to try. Like, oh, who am I to get on this big stage? I don't know. I'm going to try. So a lot of it was not waiting for the permission to try. I was just like, you know what? I'm scared. I'm scared out of my mind, but I'm still going to at least take a step and try it. I had the formula backwards. It's like, once I'm confident, then I'll get on the stage and speak. Once I'm confident, then I'll write this book. Once I'm confident, then I'm going to address these bullies. And that's the actual opposite way of how this works. You actually have to do the thing, and then the confidence follows. It's not the other way around. Action always precedes confidence. So it's like, if I do something, whatever that something is, I'm going to show up and get on the stage. Everyone, well, I'm not going to say everyone, I'll speak for myself. I get nervous before I speak. And when I was beginning my speaking career, I was very nervous early on. But the more I did it, the confidence came. And now if you see me speak, you might be like, oh, he seems really confident on stage. But that's only because I forced myself to get on those stages when I wasn't confident. Same idea. Like, people were saying, hey, man, your ideas about spreading kindness and joy in the workplace, it's cheesy. No one's going to hire you for that. I was like, okay, well, guess what? I'm going to try and I'm going to see. And as I did it more often and talked about it, it built confidence. And now I feel very, very confident in the idea that kindness is a thing that the world needs. I don't even know if I need confidence because you can look around and know that that's clear. But the idea is I'm no longer scared of the idea that I don't belong or I'm some sort of misfit that wants to believe that this world can be kinder despite so much glaring contrary evidence. I'm still going to show up and do it because I believe in the importance of it, but it wouldn't have happened if I didn't initially just try when I was scared at the beginning.
And I think what inspires me as I'm listening to you is the power of believing you are enough today, and you are better today than you were yesterday. And every single step that you're taking along the way allows you to see things differently, to grow, to evolve into a better version of yourself. And that's really very beautiful. And I compliment you for that.
Thank you. That's super kind and not unlike yourself, by the way. So, I mean, you're very inspirational to me as well. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you for those kind words.
So, Shola, the beyond the stages that you speak on, you have also written two books. And I want to talk about one of them that is called Go Together, that dives into the topic of Ubuntu. And I was wondering if you can share with our listeners what Ubuntu is and why it is so important in shaping our future for the better.
So I love this word, and I loved your pronunciation of it too. Very nicely done. So yeah, Ubuntu is an African philosophy that is loosely translated to mean "I am because we are." It's the height of human kindness, human compassion, and human togetherness. It's often considered like the art of being human. There's no one-to-one equivalent in the English language for Ubuntu, so it really is the height of kindness and compassion and connectedness. This word matters to me so much because I feel like there's so much power in if we can just see our shared humanity, something that we are not very good at doing right now. We're in a very divided world where across racial lines, political lines, gender identity lines, and this is, and I want to be clear that this is the beauty of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not about we're all the same. It's not that. We do have differences, but we honor our differences and we honor our shared humanity. It's not like we all need to be this in order for us to get together. No, I can be a black heterosexual man and someone else could be a white, like born again Christian, whatever it may be. And we can still come together and be like, hey, cool. Like, I see you, you see me, we see each other, we see our humanity. I look at why this matters because oftentimes people hear stories of Ubuntu and like, that's cool. That's some faraway continent, whatever. It wouldn't work here in the United States of America. It's like, well, I often think about 9/11 as a really interesting example of the spirit of Ubuntu. When the World Trade Towers went down and, it was a horrific situation for all parties involved and one of the worst moments in American history, something beautiful happened during this time. It didn't matter if you were gay, straight, white, black, Republican, Democrat, born again Christian, atheist, Muslim, Jew, everyone came together. And if someone was like, I don't know, under the rubble in New York City after the trade towers went down, no one was like, oh, hold on a second, before I help you out, how do you plan on voting in this November's election? Like, none of that came up. It was like, I just want to honor our shared humanity and come together. I remember reading somewhere that like no one wants to go back to September 11th, 2001, but a lot of people want to go back to September 12th, 2001, right? That day was when we were really sharing our humanity in a way that is quite frankly uncommon these days. That's what Ubuntu is. It's this idea that there's no place where I end and where Dr. Andrea begins, even though we're in separate locations. we are together. So if I were to harm you by going online and writing toxic reviews about your podcast and your books or something like that, invariably I may be hurting you, but I'm also hurting myself. That's what shared humanity is. That's what this Ubuntu mindset is. And my work is considering how to operationalize that in workplaces, getting people to see how being supportive of each other and creating healthy workplaces not only helps you, but it helps your colleagues and it helps your organization and it helps the clients and the students or the patients or whomever you serve to do their best work, to get the best care and to get the best education. Everyone wins. So we have to root out the bad behavior and find a way to come together. And that's what Ubuntu is all about in my mind.
This brings me to the topic of joy. And I was curious to get your views on how you see joy intersecting with the pursuit of healthier and more respectful workplaces.
Joy is such a wonderful word, and it's funny now that I've taken my work to creating what I like to call environments of joyful peak performance, right? That's the thing. So I often, if it's okay, I'd love to just quickly differentiate between happiness and joy, because I think sometimes that is a thing that kind of confuses people. At least for me, it used to. I feel I've always found happiness to be something that's external. It's like I got off stage and they gave me a standing ovation. I feel really happy. However, I don't get a standing ovation after every talk. Let me be clear. I've had some talks that don't work out that great, and I may get off stage and not get that standing ovation, but I leave feeling joy, which may seem strange because the joy that I have comes internally. The joy comes from the ability to share this work with others. Keeping with this example, even if I don't get a standing ovation, I know that in an audience of maybe 500 people, 10 of those people were touched by the message, and maybe you do something to change their lives in a positive way. That's what brings me joy. So that's irrespective of the audience reaction of people cheering and screaming. It's knowing that I'm doing this. And even if those 10 people don't exist, 0 out of 500 people hated the talk, which is pretty unlikely, but let's go with it. I still feel joy knowing I'm doing work that lights my soul up, that allows me to feel good about something, stepping out of a period of depression and fear and shame and self-loathing to do work that I actually care about. That brings me joy because it's more internal. So back to your question. Well, I feel like why joy matters in workplaces so much is that if we're driven internally by a need to self-actualize or to do work that's actually going to make the world a better place, regardless of what that work is, coming together and seeing our differences and maybe finding a way to disagree without disrespect in the betterment of creating a better world, not only does that create more joyful work, but it creates a world that we can all be proud of and sets an example for other organizations, quite frankly, that are not behaving that way, to be like, what are they doing over at this place? Why are they always getting the best talent? How come their turnover numbers are so low? How come they're always finding a way to impact the community and get such powerful ways of expression that gets people excited that we're not doing? That's my hope, is that we can lead by example through having joyful cultures. And by people having joyful cultures, doesn't mean that everyone's dancing around and screaming and having a great time. Joy can also be there during dark moments where things aren't going well. How we got to come together. I wouldn't call September 11th joyful because it wasn't. But what it was beautiful in the sense of it showed how we can come together even in moments of darkness and in challenge and, quite frankly, in fear. Even in dark situations, you can find joy. And that's what I find I want to bring so much to the world. It almost gets me to a point where I can get emotional just talking about it, because it's like I feel like this is how we can change our current discourse. And I'm here to continue to trumpet the power of joy in workplaces as loudly as I can.
I love it. So beautiful. And I'm thinking about some of the leaders that could be listening to your story and your insights. What effective strategies would you suggest that they move forward with in order to foster more joyful cultures?
There's a lot. I'll highlight one because I think this is kind of just the easiest low hanging fruit. creating an environment of psychological safety. I think this is one thing. We are in a world now where we are under more stress as we're recording this podcast episode than we were during the height of the pandemic 4 years ago. So that's something to think about, right? We're all struggling with mental health issues, heightened anxiety, fear, whatever it may be. So as a leader, if you can create an environment of psychological safety where people can basically raise their hand, figuratively speaking, and say things like, I'm burned out, or I need help, or I don't know what to do next. And they can share that openly without the fear of being shamed for doing so. That's a powerful thing that leaders can do. So when people are struggling, as we all are in our own way, I've seen leaders who fail to do this. So if I'm like, I'm really struggling, my kids are having these issues and I'm struggling with my spouse, or God knows all the toxicities going around the world right now and the wars overseas are affecting me and I'm really feeling down. If the leader's like, well, that's just too bad. Suck it up, buttercup. Everyone's dealing with some challenges right now. Why do you feel so special? You're not alone. Then that person is like, oh, this isn't a safe space for me to share. So I'm going to go into my bubble and keep this to myself. Now, that may seem like an isolated incident, but it's not, because what's going to end up happening is when something happens with this person's work that the boss needs to know, that person's going to be way less likely to tell the boss because it's not a safe space to share unless it's only good news. Then the person going to keep that to themselves, which is going to affect outcomes. And if you work in healthcare, God forbid, that could actually affect people's lives. So psychological safety and creating an environment of openness is something that you can easily do to create an environment of joy, because people are going to feel, oh my gosh, she listens to me, she understands me, and she respects me. And I feel like if things aren't going well, I can say the truth and I can get feedback. And I'm more willing to accept challenging feedback, knowing that this environment is one of respect, mutual respect. That's something that I feel is lacking in a lot of environments that don't have a joyful experience of peak performance. And often it's that. It's just simply psychological safety. There's many more around creating respect and accountability and trust and communicating well and handling conflict well and on and on and on. I could go forever. But just one that could have like the most far-reaching impact on a positive culture is creating an environment of psychological safety.
You've written a second book, and now you have just finished writing your third book that will be coming out in the near future.
I'm just so grateful that the manuscript has been submitted and I can breathe a sigh of healthy relief.
So can you share some insights about this new book that will be coming out in the near future and some key strategies that you will be planning to share with the world?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So yes, so my third book is called Civil Unity: The Radical Path to Transform Our Discourse, Our Lives, and Our World. So it's been kind of a logical progression. So making work, I was focused like on the workplace and really trying to figure out how to make the workplace better and less full of bullying and harassment. The second book, Go Together, was around the spirit of Ubuntu and honoring our shared humanity so we can improve our society. This book now is kind of taking a larger, more global view of how we can improve and change our world based on civility. And really, it's this idea of how can we disagree without disrespect? So I get a lot of questions as I was traveling internationally, and some of the questions were very, very powerful. Like, hey, how can we stay civil when we're dealing with really polarizing situations like abortion or immigration or politics? I don't understand how to stay civil in those situations with relatives who may see the world differently than me. Or how am I supposed to stay civil when I'm faced with really awful intolerance like racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, misogyny? And why should I stay civil when people are being racist, for example? Or how do I stay civil when I'm dealing with people who traffic in dark web conspiracy theories? Like, I don't understand. They're not even tethered to reality. So how can I stay civil when I'm dealing with someone who's radicalized? Or my fourth most common one was like, how in the world should I stay civil when someone who's deeply hurt me? Like someone said, like the drunk driver who killed my child, or the spouse who's been cheating on me for 4 years and infected me with a sexually transmitted disease. Like, how in the world am I supposed to stay civil to these people? So I wanted to get past the basic stuff in civility, like the civility 101 curricula, like, hey, just smile when people are rude to you. Like, that's no utility in this world. And if someone's harming you, smiling and turning the other cheek is going to land you in a mental institution. I don't have any interest in that. How can we practically apply civility in a world that's deeply divided, in a way that we can use this to restore our discourse, in a way that we can just find a way to move forward? Because the idea that we need to agree with everyone before we can be civil to them is just an exercise in futility and in immaturity. It doesn't make any sense. We're going to inhabit this world with people who do not see the world as we do. And as soon as we learn how to navigate with them, the better it'll be for all of us. So this book is not just a practical, or it's not just a theoretical book, because I think there's a lot of books that are very theoretical around this topic. I want to get very practical with tools that can be useful. I'll share one that could be useful to people who maybe are dealing with polarizing conversations. Let's say it's around the holidays. It doesn't have to be around the holidays, it can be anytime, right? Where someone brings up a polarizing issue. Let's just go with just abortion. That's an easy one, right? Where emotions are very high and people have very diametrically opposed positions. I have so many different practical tools, but one that I like to use is this idea about setting ground rules before entering difficult, polarizing situations. So if someone comes in and shares an opinion about abortion that may be different from mine, I will immediately set the ground rules, and I will do so in a way like this. Dr. Andrea, so before we go forward, I know that this conversation about abortion can go off the rails pretty quickly. Can we agree to stay respectful, even if my views are different from yours? It's super simple. I'm doing a couple of things. So I'm noting that these type of conversations can get emotionally charged. I am setting the idea of saying, hey, can we stay respectful, even if my views are different than yours? So now I'm doing something intentionally. I'm peeling back and I'm putting the ball into your court. We're going to decide. I've already decided I can stay respectful, but can you? So now this is going to be on you to see if you're like, no, screw you. If you think that blah, 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 blah is the case, that we can't have, okay, then we're done. Then it's over. But if you decide to say, okay, great, well, here are my thoughts on this. And then I share my thoughts, which could be and likely are in this particular example the opposite of what you may have. And then you're challenged to, instead of getting emotionally triggered and going to a place like, rah, you idiot, because you think this, you're now like, all right, how can I have this conversation and share my views with respect? This is important because there's science behind this, right? There's something called the Boomerang effect, which is based on the reactance theory, which is from like 1966. Long story short, not to nerd out on science too much, the idea is that if I attack you for your belief, it doesn't do anything to change your belief. This is common sense, but it's strange how uncommon this idea is for people to understand. If I attack you for your belief, you're not going to be like, wow, thank you for calling me an idiot. Maybe I am an idiot. I got to change my views. No, instead you double down and you become more entrenched in those views. It's like, if I'm going to say you're an idiot for believing X about abortion, now you're going to now be more deeply tethered to those beliefs, which serves no one. Me, if I'm trying to have maybe you open your mind to a different viewpoint, it's now been closed. And I was the one who closed it because I decided to attack you. It's like when you see someone who has a sign on their front lawn that says, "Stay off the grass!" Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. What people will do invariably, and science has shown this, is they will actually intentionally walk on the grass to be like, it's like, screw you. Who are you to tell me not to walk on the grass? If you had a sign that said, please be kind and stay off the grass, it's like, oh, okay, cool, I'll stay off. But once you attack me, it's like you're also attacking my autonomy, my ability to be an autonomous human being. And by you doing this, I'm like, no, I have my autonomy. Screw you. I'm trampling on your grass. Or in this case of the abortion argument, oh, you're telling me I'm an idiot? Guess what? I'm not an idiot. And now I'm going to be more deeply entrenched in these views. So my challenge for people with these ground rules is you're creating an environment where you're inviting people to engage in typically difficult, polarizing discussions respectfully and exercise a muscle that we don't really exercise much these days. And what's cool about this is if it's done well, maybe you may even open the person's mind a little bit to your viewpoint. It's not going to happen the other way. Let's be clear. So setting ground rules is one of the practical tools that I offer, and there's plenty more, but that's one of the ones that I highly recommend. The goal is to start to bring back our discourse off the brink, the precipice of the abyss where we currently are. And the only way we can do that is by engaging in wildly difficult action, not just difficult, but different action. And that's what civil unity is going to be all about. And I'm just so pumped because it's so fresh in my head because I just submitted the manuscript and it comes out in September 2024. So I'm just kind of like, just giddy that it's out of my head and I'm done typing it and I can just like, just let it go out through the universe.
Congratulations. I absolutely know the feeling.
I know you do. I know it's something like, and you know this, Dr. Andrea, I think that I'm spitballing here, but there's a percentage of like the amount of people who want to write a book and the ones who actually do it, right? Because as you know, staring at the blinking cursor and just trying to make sense of it. I mean, I know that's why a lot of people get their books ghostwritten because it's like, it's like, you read it for me. Like I like the challenge and I enjoy writing, but man, it is not an easy slog.
Everything that you have shared has really resonated for me very, very deeply. And I'm curious to know, who was Shola in his younger days? Can you take us to the beginning of your teenage years, your adult years, and were some of the beliefs and insights and wisdom that you have shared with us today, was that there back then? And how has it evolved? And even how has your view on joy and positive impact on this world evolved with time?
Wow, great question. So no, those beliefs were not there before. I was a very deeply, deeply insecure kid who was just a chronic people pleaser. Like I would do whatever it took. And I didn't stand up for myself ever. And I experienced a lot of happiness, I felt, but not true joy, because I don't feel my happiness came in ways that could be considered maladaptive. I would see someone being bullied and they didn't turn their bullying to me, and that made me happy. It was like, oh my gosh, I got spared. The guy I am today, that would never bring me joy or happiness because someone's suffering. And that to me is a problem. So as a kid, I was like most teenagers, self-focused. But I also was deeply insecure. I felt like people who would hang out with me did so because they felt sorry for me. I felt like the girls that I dated, they liked me because maybe I played on the basketball team and I was good, but not because they actually liked me as a person. They liked dating the idea of me. I had really harmful beliefs around myself that weren't helpful. But I do think what helped from my younger days to where I am now is I realized that real happiness, like true happiness and joy, was something that was fleeting. And I was so desperate to figure out how to find it. I wanted to find this idea of like, why can't people be kinder to each other? This is something that followed me for my whole life. Why can't people be kinder? Why can't people be kinder? And so that was something from the beginning, many years ago as a teenager, that I'm still asking now. Why can't people be kinder? So I think that was the thing that kind of influenced my work. But I feel that my insecurities played a big role in me realizing that I could not do this all by myself. I'm not good enough to do this on my own. I'm not smart enough. I need to lean on others. I need to lean on the work of others, the kindness of others, the support of others. And that's what kind of drove me to this information phase where I would spend so many days when I was in college in Barnes and Noble, in Borders bookstores back in the day. And these books that are behind me, they're not for show. Like they're real actual books. It's not a literal background. I read a ton, and because I've been devouring information around how can I become a better person? And my thing back then, unfortunately, was like, how can I become a better person so people will like me more? That's where I was going with this. Now it's more around the idea like, how can I become a better person so I can impact the world in a positive way? I'm fine with who I am now. But back in the day, I wasn't. And I think as I read more information, I realized, oh my gosh, wait, I'm not the problem. In fact, if anything, I can be part of the solution if I decide to take this information and apply it in a way that's going to hopefully serve others. And that's where it started from. Insecurity to searching information to realizing that I wasn't the problem and that I could be the solution.
What advice would you have for parents in order to raise kids that are more self-confident and more joyful?
So I'm proud dad of two lovely girls, soon to be teenagers. And it's funny because I always feel that kids are watching you. They are always, and that's the thing I would say. It doesn't matter what you say, your kids are always watching you. They always see what you're doing. They're very astute if your words and actions are aligned. So for me, confidence comes from demonstrating it and acting when afraid. So when my girl's like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous for this presentation, I was like, you should be. It's a presentation. I get it. I'm nervous before I give, but you're still going to do it, right? My daughter just recently, this actually happened just yesterday. She's in a track meet and she was doing an event that she hasn't done before. It's the 400 meter. And she's like, I'm nervous. I don't want to come in last. I'm like, babe, you're going to be nervous. This is the first time you've ever done something. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Like the old Susan Jeffers book says. It's like, so let's just do it. Let's see what happens. And so she got up there and she's seen me do this plenty of times. So I tell my kids, I'm nervous about this talk. I had them come to my TEDx talk and I was like, I'm really nervous about this. And they saw that I was nervous and they saw me get up on stage and do it anyway. That's beautiful. So that's something that they see. Oh, he says he's nervous, but he still does it. That's something that I want to really instill in them so they can see I'm not just saying, hey, don't be scared. And then I'm operating completely against that with my actions. I want them to say, listen, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I think my girls see that, which is cool. So when they have sporting events or big presentations or anything that matters to them, they see that their dad and their mom, we both do things when we're scared. And then they realize like, oh, that's okay. So as parents, I think the best thing we can do is model the behavior that we want to see. I think it's really toxic when I see things where you're expecting your kids to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. Like, what is that? Like, that's just bizarre. And I'll go even farther because this actually happened relatively recently. I was in the mall and there was a little boy, I don't even know, I'm guessing maybe 4 or 5, kindergarten age. Something happened. He wanted something and he didn't get something. And this is, I'm presuming this part, but what I did see is that he started crying. And then the mom said to him, stop crying, boys don't cry, stop crying. And I just like, oh my God, what are we doing? This is what we're teaching this poor kid who is sad about something. He's 4 years old, presumably. And you're teaching him that boys don't cry because that's what girls do or whatever silly, ridiculous narrative you're sharing with this child. It does come down to modeling the correct behaviors, but it's also about not doing anything to create these really toxic and rigid ideas around what it means to be human in this world that's going to stunt joyfulness and the expression of joyfulness. Because yeah, joyfulness is one thing, but also sadness and the ability to have to hold parts of you back is going to make it harder for you to be joyful. So as a parent, I think full expression, let's do that. Obviously, you don't want anyone to harm themselves or to harm others, but if you're crying, that's part of life. Crying is, I cry freely. I'm very happy to do that. Some people may be, oh, well, you're not a real man if you don't cry. Like, grow up. Like, grow up. It's okay to cry if you're a man or whatever gender identity you assume that you want to, that you feel. It's not, you don't have to be in a position to be a certain narrative to cry. Crying is human. And that's just one example. It's just on my mind because it happened recently. I'm just like, oh, I'm also mad at myself for not saying something. Maybe I should have. I don't even know if I even should have, if it would be appropriate to, but I felt like it, as a highly sensitive person, I walked away feeling this for a while and I was like, I should have said something and I didn't.
If you could leave a message in a time capsule that will be opened a century from now, what would you want it to convey to the people that will be opening it?
Oh, gosh. So many things. I get one message. Okay, well, let's go with this. Be kinder than you feel comfortable being. What I mean by this is this idea of like, we're so focused on just being kind to the people who look like us or vote like us or pray like us or whatever. Expand your kindness and be kinder than you're more comfortable. You may be comfortable being kind with this particular group and maybe not kind to that group. Be kinder to them. We have no idea what struggles they're going through. None. And those struggles could be really dark and challenging. And we have an opportunity to potentially heal a life. Like, and I'm using this and it may seem like, wow, heal a life. That seems a lot. There could be someone, it could be the barista in Starbucks, where maybe they got our order wrong and you're in a moment right then where you can decide to just verbally eviscerate this person or be like, hey, no worries. I just wanted, I didn't want this. I wanted that instead. Can I get it again? That person could be in a position where they're dealing with deep mental health challenges and you going off on them could be the thing that puts them over the edge. So when I had that time capsule that's open generations from now, maybe Starbucks will still be in existence, but wherever it is, thinking about these small interactions and how you have an opportunity to potentially give more kindness to them. There's a quote that I love from a guy named Brennan Manning. It said, in every interaction, you are either giving life or you are draining it. There is no neutral exchange. I think about that every day. And it's like one of those things, like, if we can have that idea of being kinder, more kinder than you feel comfortable being, what could that do for someone? That could actually like change the world, right? So that's what I'm leaning toward. That would be my podcast moment right there. My time capsule moment right there is just be kinder than you feel comfortable being.
Wonderful. Shola, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you immensely for everything you have shared. And may you continue shining a bright light on this world. Thank you.
And likewise, keep up the great work and thank you for having me in the podcast. Here's to more joy in the future.